you just need to give God time to work all things together for your good. How was that? That's pretty. Worship team? Yeah, we're done. No, we're not. You have to let God work. Giving God time to work, that phrase is kind of summed up. Let me mess with this a little bit. That phrase is kind of summed up in one word. It's not a word we like. It's patience. Patience. You guys love patience? Is that like your favorite thing, Tonight I thought we would talk about patience. It's not my favorite topic. Definitely not my strong suit. Ask my wife. Patience is one of those words we don't like. It's kind of like that word change. You guys like that word change? Most of us hate change. And we hate it, when we're blindsided by circumstances that all of a sudden, boom, our lives change. I mean, we're comfortable. We have our routine. Life's easy. We're content. And then, bam, pow, change, Here's the truth about change. We hate change, but change is the tool that God uses to get us from where we're at and move us to where he wants us. Anytime God moves us, anytime God uses our circumstance to grow us, anytime that God takes us to a new place where, he can use us to serve the body of Christ in a new way, or maybe as a witness to someone, God uses change. And change is the process that God uses to get us from where we're at to where he wants us for the greater good. And we hate change. We may try to avoid change, but it's God's tool. It's God's tool, right? So like I said tonight, I'm going to talk about patience. And like change, patience is another one of those things that we try to avoid. But here's the thing. Patience, long-suffering patience, it's one of those fruits of the Spirit. It's right there. It's the fruit of the Spirit. So even though we may not be fans of patience, for some reason, and I don't understand it, but God, God's God, and he's the one that sets these things up. God knows it's critical for our spiritual walk. It's critical for the arsenal of weapons that we're going to need to fight our daily battle of faith. We need patience. And the way I see it is the big problem with that word patience, there's a problem with it, at least for me. The big problem is that we all know how we get more patience. We know Romans 5, verse 3, right? And not only so, but we glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulation worketh patience. Tribulation worketh patience. Tribulation, no thanks. No, I don't need any tribulation. So we've all heard this advice. You guys have probably given this advice. Don't pray for patience. God will give you tribulation, trials. And we know that. Don't pray for patience. So last year, against my better judgment, I prayed for patience. Yeah, it was dumb. I know, it was dumb. But I figured, hey, I already had so much tribulation in my life, I might as well get something out of it, So I did. I prayed for patience. So Deborah had been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. We were going back and forth to Kaiser Hospital in Roseville, California every week. That was her insurance. That was her treatment. And then, of course, in the middle of all this, she fell. She broke her back. She broke 3 ribs. So she had 2 back surgeries to fix that, right? And the 2 surgeries were because the first surgery came apart. The screws pulled right out of her spine. That was nice. And then recovering from her surgery, her kidneys failed. She almost died. And then in the middle of all this, Kaiser canceled our medical insurance. So, she was in the hospital. She was in rehab. She was in nursing home for 3 to 4 months. In that whole travel time back and forth, we had a car crash, working on the house. I sliced my wrist, not really bad, not on purpose. Really bad, but not on purpose. I accidentally put my hand through a garage door window as I was trying to hold it up and put it back in the tracks. Okay, just dumb stuff. There's blood everywhere. And, I could go on with these trials and tribulation stuff. I could just go on and on and on. So in all my wisdom, and us guys, we're really known for wisdom, right? So in all my wisdom, I figured out, why not pray for patience? God probably wouldn't give me any more tribulation because I already had plenty. So the patience would just be like a freebie from God. Everybody say freebie. That was actually my thought process. That's true confession right there. Yeah, freebie. So what can I say? So the way that you develop patience is that God gives you practice with things that try your patience. It's like lifting weights. You want that patient muscle, that patience muscle. You get to deal with things that try your patience. And God tells us exactly that. Gives us his process for acquiring more patience, and he gives us this really odd instruction. And what he says is, enjoy the ride. Patience. You want patience? Tribulation. Enjoy the ride. Turn to our passage tonight, James 1. We're going to begin in verse 2. James 1. Verse 2. Look here, look what it says. My brethren, count it all joy when, not if, when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. Count it all joy. Enjoy the ride. You're going to have patience. It's a win, Joy comes, going through trials isn't fun, but we're supposed to consider it joy. We're to understand that trials, tribulations build patience. The joy comes from knowing that God is up to something. God's up to something. He's growing us, and that there's going to be God-given fruit at the end of our trial. Deb and I are going through more trials right now. We've had our faith tested before, like most of you. Years ago, we became homeless. Not living on the street homeless, but homeless. Not living in a car homeless, But the house we were renters. The house we were renting sold. And, of course, we had to move. We had to move. We didn't have a choice. Now, it's in the middle of this crazy housing boom where the prices skyrocketed. So people were selling, people were buying. There was this buying frenzy. People were selling their houses, taking these huge profits. And we weren't in a position to buy. So here we are. We're renters, right? There weren't any rental properties because everybody was selling, right? And if you did happen to find one, there'd be like 10 people in front of you in line ahead of you. And the house we were in sold, and we moved out. No place to go. We moved out. I had a wife, 3 kids in different schools, of course. Why not? And a full-time job. I was leading worship at my church. Deb was basically an invalid. I mean, she needed both hips replaced, and so she was just a wreck. And I was just trying to juggle everything, keep us all afloat, And my 2 daughters and my wife were in one city. One of the ladies from church. My son was in a different city with a school friend from high school. I was in another city living with the family of my sound man. Hey, Norm, I'm moving in. No, it's not a good idea. He'll let you know. Anyway, it was a trial. Believe me, it's a trial. Very humbling. Guys especially, we want to be self-sufficient. We want to be independent. We work so hard to, provide for our families and keep it all together. And going through all of this, I kept thinking, seriously, God? This is working together for my good. Are you kidding me? That was my prayer. That's the way I talked to God. He's a big boy. He can get over it. I just talked to him. Seriously, God, this is working together for my good? Are you kidding me? But that's his promise. Romans 8:28. And we know, you got to say it like Ed. Is it Opperman? Ed. He does it this way. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. So I had his promise. He was working all things together for my good. And I was supposed to count it joy. But the day-to-day reality, my circumstances, what was right here in front of my face was homelessness. The only thing I could see was my circumstances, but despite all those things, I had his promise. One hand, my circumstances. On the other hand, his promises. Circumstances are facts, right? You can't deny those things. They're real. That stuff is really going on. Believing God, believing His Word, believing His promises in the face of your circumstances takes faith. It takes faith. You know, faith is resolving in your heart to believe God in spite of any circumstances, in spite of any evidence to the contrary, what I like to call circumstantial evidence. It's just circumstantial evidence. You know, you can't convict on circumstantial evidence, in case you didn't know. We have God's promise. He's going to work it all together for our good. That's His promise. Can God lie? He can't lie. Having said all that, there's something we don't think about very often. There's something we just don't think about very often related to that promise of working all things together for our good. Time. Time. We don't think about time very often. Why? Why time? Because the testing of your faith is a process. The testing of your faith is a process. Let's just say, so it's going to take time. Let's just say it wasn't. Let's say it didn't take time. Let's say, here's how God worked. You know, you have this trial, and boom, God answered that trial immediately. How much faith is that going to build in you? Like zero. You have a need, it's handled, you don't even think about, no. So it wouldn't take any faith at all if that was the way that God did things. But no, He gives us this thing. It's a process. It's a process. Building your faith takes time. The process will never be immediate, but God's promise still stands. Look at that passage back in James 1 again. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But then notice, we have this instruction right here in verse 4. It says this, it says, but let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. One of the things that we read here is that we have to let patience have its perfect work. We have to let patience work. There's something God's growing in us called patience, and we have to let it work. God's working to perfect us, but we have to let Him. We have to let Him. It's a process. It's going to take time for faith to grow, for God to perfect us and complete us. Being homeless, I can just tell you from experience, it's no fun. It's no fun. But eventually, God took us from being homeless and put us in what turned out to be our miracle home. Okay, miracle home. It was a rental. We were renters, But then, a couple of years later, God worked this crazy miracle. It was just out of the blue, He allowed us to buy the house that we were already in. Here we are, we're renters. God allows us to buy this house that we're already in for way, way under market value. We didn't even have to move. We didn't have to move. Think about that. I didn't have to move my fridge. Right? I didn't have to clean out the fridge. We didn't have to pack. All those wonderful things that we love doing when we're moving, right? God enabled us to buy the house that we were already living in. It's perfect for us. It was a perfect place for us, and now we owned it. What a tremendous blessing to be homeowners again, but it gets even better. So selling the home years later, okay? House is almost paid for now. Years later, selling the home allowed us to buy our home here in Dayton, okay? Moving to Dayton, meeting, serving, fellowshipping with you all, living in this town, in our new home, been one of the biggest blessings of our life. It's mind-blowing for us. It's just mind-blowing. It is. It's paradise. It's wild. And Dayton could have never have happened if we hadn't been homeless. It's just like looking back, it's almost as if God had a plan, you think. Yeah, He had a plan. So, yeah, we got to see God work, we got to see God work in this situation, in this trial, to see God work it all together for our good, but it didn't happen overnight. Didn't happen overnight. For all I know, I don't put anything past God. So for all I know, He may not be done with blessing our lives directly from that situation. There's so much blessing knowing you all and living here. I mean, who knows what could be next? All of that is due directly from being homeless. It's wild. God working all things together for our good. It's the same thing when it comes to patience and the things that try our patience. Growth is a process, and we have to learn to let patience work. I love how God lets us know that it's okay. It's okay to talk to him about all of this, because the process of growth, that whole thing, being in that place of circumstance and promise, being in all that place, it can get confusing. So check it out. James 1, we're now in verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. We don't have to go down this road without talking to God about it. It's like, what was my prayer? Are you seriously, God? Are you kidding me? This is working together for my good. That was my prayer. That was the way I talked to him. And he's, and it was, is this working together? This is working together for my good. It was my question. And of course it was working together. I couldn't see it. So if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. He's not intimidated by our questions. He promises to give wisdom liberally without reproach. Verse 6, but let him ask in faith with no doubting. Don't even consider those circumstances. Stay over here on the faith side. For he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Those trials come with a promise. Our job is to believe, to stay in faith. God's going to deliver us. I love how Gary outlines the 3 ways that God delivers us. I had to call him up and make sure I got it right, because the way he says this is just great. Sometimes God delivers us from our trial. Okay, it could happen. I don't know if those of you were here the time I spoke and I talked to you about the $50,000 bill that we got from the Social Security, and then we had to walk in and we had to meet Elvira, She was Elvira on a bad day, and she was coming after us, she wanted her $50,000. And in the meeting, it was just, I don't want to tell the whole story again, but just trust me, this was a total God moment where we walked in, we sat down, we were under a tremendous attack, and God flipped a switch, and we went from attack to total deliverance in about 3 seconds. It was just bizarre to watch God. We walked out of that meeting going, what just happened? That was the weirdest thing. Have you ever seen anything like that? No, it was weird, And so sometimes God delivers us from our trial. The miracle just blows our mind, and we go, what was that? Sometimes God delivers us through our trial. Talking about process, through a trial. It's what we see in Psalms 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Okay? Sometimes God delivers us by our trial. And we've seen friends die. Precious friends. Sweethearts. Love them. Saw a video today of one of my favorite people in the world. It's just so precious to me. Friend posted it. We've seen friends die. They're going through cancer or something, and God takes them home. It's better to be with God, to be in that face-to-face place in heaven, where we get to see him face-to-face, than it is to be here in this through a glass darkly place, where we're subject to the constant trials and attacks of this world. Sometimes God delivers us by our trial. It happens. Those are the 3 ways God, from, through, or by our trials. But no matter how God moves in your life, your faith is critical. Understanding his promise is going to be his promise. I bet if we passed the mic around tonight, pass the mic around this room, every single person in this room, I bet you money, could tell a story of the situation, the circumstances they're facing right now that are challenging their faith, testing their patience when it comes to the promises of God. God has a plan to bless you, but the key word on his promise, where he says that he's going to work all things together for our good, the key word there is work. He's going to work all all things together for good. But that word work, says there's some time involved. There's a plan involved. God has a plan to perfect you, to complete you, but the key instruction to us, related on that plan, you have to let patience have its perfect work. Those promises as well as examples. All throughout the Bible, we have those promises, and then we have examples of people dealing with stuff. I mean, think about Joseph. Here he is. He's sold into slavery. Job lost everything. Abraham and Sarah, who received a promise from God that they're going to have a son. He was 100. She was 90. Those promises and examples all indicate that God's up to something. You just need to let him work out his plan and his promise. You have to let God work. It's a time factor related. There is a time factor related to his promise. We have to understand that there's power in waiting. There's power in waiting. Truth is that there's a promise at the end of that waiting time. The prophet Micah put it this way. In Micah 7:7, he says this, "Therefore, I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me." My God's going to hear me. David. Think about David. Here's this kid. He's anointed by Samuel as king. So he gets anointed. He's a youngster. And he's got a promise from God. He's going to be king. But it wasn't until like 15 years later that he became king. And he had to go through a bunch of stuff, where he had to face a giant. The guy who was already there, who was king, was out to kill him. It's just all this stuff. He had to patiently wait for the Lord to work. And talking to the Lord. Here he is. He's talking to the Lord in Psalm 39, verse 7. He's talking to the Lord about all of this. And he says this, and he says, "And now, Lord, what do I wait on?" And you would think, you're waiting to be king. And he says this, he says, "And now, Lord, what do I wait for? My hope is in you." My hope is in you. And think about how single-minded that statement is. My hope is in you. That statement is so full of faith. And here's another promise we all know. Isaiah 40, verse 31. "But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." The Bible is full of verses instructing us about waiting, about patience, about faith. We could go on and on. So here's my exhortation tonight. When your circumstances become a trial, and it's going to be a win, it'll be, it's happening. When your patience is being tried to the breaking point, remember to keep your eyes on the future, not on the present. Keep your eyes on the future. We live in the now, but God's outside of time. And he not only knows our future, the Bible says he is the author and finisher of our faith. He's up to something. He's building your faith. He's growing your patience. He's got a plan to bless you. He can't lie. He can't lie. We have to let God work all things together for our good. It's going to try our patience, but God gives us his promise. So that's my exhortation. Let God work. Every single situation you're in, let him work. Let him work. Give it time. Amen?